I'll be talking with CCG industry insider David Frank, formerly of the United States Playing Card Company and Games Workshop, and most notable for being the creator of the Outrider Program, a volunteer initiative to promote games like Warhammer at both conventions and local stores. Welcome everyone to the Alien Investigations channel. I'm Steven, and you're watching The Magic Bullet. If you're unfamiliar with the Outrider program, it was an ambassador-type initiative by Games Workshop back in the 90s, wherein participants would receive training at a Games Workshop store and would then act as representatives at local hobby shops, tournaments, and conventions to demonstrate and promote certain games. The Outrider program was created in late 1993 by Mr. David Scott Frank III, who, following an 8-year stint in the United States Army, served as a convention coordinator for Games Workshop from 1992 to 1997. After that, Mr. Frank was enlisted by X-Files CCG creators Ron Kent and Duncan McDonnell to help market and promote the X-Files Collectible Card Game. Deriving inspiration for the Outrider program, Mr. Frank would go on to create the Special Agent Demo program for the X-Files CCG in 1997, and participants would again be deputized to promote the game at Gen Con and other events. I recently had the privilege of sitting down with Mr. Frank to hear all about his experience working in the card game industry. Let's listen in. I can't thank you enough for taking the time to speak with me, good sir. If you could tell us how you got your start in the industry, and of course, how was it that the Outrider program came to fruition?
So if we turn on our Wayback Machine, it is the beginning of 1992. I am at Fort Lewis, Washington, a first lieutenant in the Army, and Desert Storm has been done, and so there's a lot of drawdowns. And so I left the Army and went back to Pennsylvania. I had actually interviewed to be a manager of a game store up in Seattle, but that just wasn't tenable. So I headed back home to Pennsylvania, and I had seen in an edition of White Dwarf, I think it was 127, where they were doing a recruitment for U.S. staff. Now, that was months before I got out of the Army, but I thought, if I ever leave, I would really like to go work for Games Workshop because I was a nerd. I was big into 40K and Space Marine, not so much Warhammer itself, but 40K and Epic. Uh, and so once I got back home, I wrote the standard introduction letter and got a no thank you. To which I sent a thank you for saying no thank you. I'm still interested. Uh, to which I got a no thank you. So I sent another letter saying thank you for saying no thank you. By the way, I'm going to be in Baltimore on these dates. Which date works best for you? And oddly enough, I got an interview from Richard Ellard, the general manager of Games Workshop. And he told me that when someone was persistent like I am, he generally liked to meet them because either they do have something to offer or, yeah, you want to put them away and not deal with them ever again. And one of the things that they were looking at, so there was Richard, and then Bob Berard was the chief financial officer of Games Workshop at the time, and they were in cahoots quite a bit. And Bob was more of an idea man. Richard sort of made things go, but Bob came up with ideas. And I want to say that it was Bob's idea that we donate Games Workshop product to the local school clubs that had D&D groups and chess clubs and stuff, as an outreach and a missionary tool to get those folks involved with Games Workshop. So when I met with Richard, he said he was looking for someone specifically who had a love for the product and knew what they were talking about on the gaming side, but also had the ability to deal with parents and adults and not come off like a weirdo or a flake. And while there were a fair number of one and a fair number of two, there weren't really any that sort of crossed that bridge. And I did. And so I got pulled on to start the club support program. And the club support program, this was not too terribly long after MAD. after the big satanic panic. And so there were a lot of clubs, there were a lot of schools that were like, hey, we don't want nothing to do with any of that stuff. So I did get into some school clubs and did get them doing some things, donated some games. From there, I sort of spread out to colleges and found a little bit more reception because a lot of the colleges had gaming clubs. So we got involved with that. And one of the local universities in Baltimore, UMBC, University of Maryland, Baltimore campus, had a club. And they asked me if I'd sponsor and help them with their one-day game convention. And did. And that was a lot of fun. And at one point, I got invited to come as a Games Workshop representative to a convention in New Jersey run by Vinny Salzillo called DexCon, and it ran for a number of years. And at the time, Workshop really didn't have a real presence, uh, any sort of a formal support program. If a convention organizer called us and asked for help, we'd send them some White Dwarf magazines and stuff. I was able to leverage my position to start going to conventions. So I would go and run demo games and take product and, basically shake hands, kiss babies, do all that kind of stuff. And that was going pretty well. That was paying much better results than the high school club support program. And then one day my boss called me in, Richard called me in, and he had a half a page of notes. And he said, Bob Berard, we're talking, and we have an idea. We have a scheme. It's like, okay. And he said, what we want to do is get volunteers to go to their local game store and their local convention and run demo games on our behalf. And so that half a page of notes was things like no fags. And by no fags, he meant no cigarettes because Richard was English. But, I sort of looked at that one. So, yeah, people had to have a certain level of professionalism. People had to certainly know how to play the current editions of the games because really, we were focusing on the things that you could buy, not the things that you used to be able to get. And so I started putting the net out, and it took that half a page of notes. And there weren't any other companies at the time that I know that did any sort of a game demonstration team. I know Steve Jackson Games was in the process of trying to set one up, but I don't know that they ever really got that off the ground. But it was actually pretty interesting. I leveraged a lot of the folks from the conventions in the New Jersey, New York, Delaware, Maryland area, and that's where sort of some of my first Outriders came from. And then we put the word out, and started getting folks to come in. And two of the guys that entered were from California, Southern California, Ron Kent and Duncan McDonnell, and brought them on board to be Outriders. And what we would do is you could do up to 6 events a year, and we paid you $100 in product because that way we were below the limit where we had to give you a 1099 and really, make you go pay taxes, even though you were responsible for paying the taxes. But there were some stipulations on how many folks you had and what you ran, and typically it was demo games of the newest product. So the newest edition of 40K, the newest edition of Warhammer, as new games came out, Man of War. I was pretty picky on who I let into the program, but they all certainly had a love for the product, a love for the hobby, and wanted to be involved because a lot of us, really do want to sort of give back or be involved in the community for the hobbies that we like. And before I knew it, I had about 40 Outriders. And I want to say when I left Workshop in 92, 96, I want to say we had 47. And we had run Games Day in a local hall back in 1993, and that was all run by staff, and that was kind of difficult. 1994, we had the Outriders come in, and the Outriders ran the game, and the staff ran the store and the administrative type things. And then the year after that, was our first year at the Baltimore Convention Center, and it grew quite a bit. And so we had the Outriders come. They had to get there themselves, but we put them up and fed them, and they ran the games, and they did a great job. And they always did a great job. I had had the opportunity as I was traveling around the country to, pop in on. Well, I guess I didn't really pop in on them. They knew I was coming, so I had the opportunity to see a lot of these guys in action, and develop some real friendships.
And that's all the time we have for today. And again, I want to thank Mr. David Frank for availing his time to give us that inside look into working in the game industry, such as it was back in the 90s. And as always, I want to know your thoughts on everything we learned, so hit up that comment section below. What did you find most fascinating? And of course, if you have any follow-up questions for Mr. Frank, I'll be more than happy to pass them along. And before I let you guys go, I want to send a shout out to everyone who's been subbing as of late and helping to grow the channel. And if you're new to the channel and you're into this sort of content, I kindly invite you to investigate that subscribe button and hit that like button as well. It's the best and easiest way to show your support. I do weekly content here on the channel, along with some occasional contests and giveaways. And that's our show for today. As always, if you need ideas on constructing an effective X-Files CCG Bureau deck, I've got sample deck videos here on the channel that should prove inspiring. And finally, you can reach out to me at alienvestigations19@gmail.com for business inquiries, or if you have ideas for upcoming content that you'd like to see. Thank you for tuning in. Once again, I'm Steven, and you've been watching The Magic Bullet.